Heyo! Welcome back to the series of Destination Unknown, a solo travel adventure. This is the 5th episode in the 10-part video series I'm doing about my travels in 2017, solo traveling around the world. This episode is about Morocco. Morocco. My, what a place. I spent 3 weeks traveling in Morocco with two great friends that I met in the first hostel that I stayed in Morocco. These two great dudes I met were Isaac and Otto, two cousins from England. I traveled with them for 3 weeks in Morocco. We learned to surf, visited the Sahara Desert and rode camels. We ate way too much bread, smoked way too much hash and tobacco, and had a ton of fun. Yalla! That's the Arabic word they say for let's go. So here's to episode 5. Yalla! After nearly 2 months in Spain, from about May to July, I decided I would go to Morocco. I bought my ferry ticket to Morocco, and the fun started right away. I was the only white person that I saw on board the ferry out of about 150 people there. And that was a good change. I felt like it was the first time in my life that I had really been the minority. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I just felt happy that I was experiencing something so new to me. The ferry was very chaotic, which seemed to be foreshadowing for how Morocco would turn out in general. Although the two official languages spoken in Morocco are Arabic and Taghazout, many people in the northern part of Morocco actually spoke 4 languages pretty well. English because it's good for tourism, French and Arabic from times long ago, and Spanish because Spain is a 2-hour ferry ride away. That being said, no one really spoke English that well, so it was hard to communicate many times. Sometimes it would be easier to communicate in my broken Spanish than it would be in my good English. Okay, there's some facts. Now back to the ferry story. When my ferry did arrive at its port, I realized that I was nowhere near my hostel. In fact, I was at a town about an hour away from where I was supposed to be. I'm not sure how I chose the wrong ferry, but it wasn't good. At the ferry station, there were a ton of taxi drivers. I really wanted to take a bus because that felt safer and it seemed like it would be cheaper as well. But the taxi guys were really pushy. Something that I would learn in Morocco is that haggling is a normal thing and people are going to haggle you all day for all sorts of things. Now, I was scared that I wasn't going to be able to make it to my hostel or even to the town that I needed to go to. So the taxi guy convinced me it was going to be a cheap ride. I would just have to pay him 25 euro and he'd take me right to where I need to go. I would find out later that I could have paid him about 15 euro, that would have been the going rate, but I didn't feel too bad about paying too much for it because, you know, those guys need some money too. Halfway through the taxi ride over to the new town, the taxi driver stopped at a bar and he walked in. I was kind of freaking out at that point. The language barrier was pretty large, I was not sure what he was doing, and I was in a strange land under this man's care. I had a lot of crazy anxiety thoughts going through my head. I was like, maybe he's grabbing guys from the bar and they're gonna kidnap me and hold me for ransom. Maybe they're just gonna rob me and leave me here. I just was so unsure of what to expect. The taxi driver walked back out of the bar with a lit cigarette in his mouth. He got back in the taxi and we went on our way. When we were almost to Tangier, the town that my hostel was in, the guy handed over the phone that he had been talking on the entire time to me, and he said that his friend wanted to talk to me. The guy on the other side of the phone, he spoke better English, and he said,
"When you arrive in town, I will take you and your bags, I will show you to the hostel, and I will show you around."
Now, it felt like I didn't really have a choice here, and that's exactly what it was, because as we arrived, the guy was right there in front of the taxi. It was super busy and chaotic already in the town center, and this guy took me and my bags to the hostel. I was thankful that he did get me there. Once I dropped my bags off at the hostel, he did expect me to go out with him again, and he would show me all around the town and the best restaurants. It really felt like he was being pushy, so I said no. I kept telling him no, and eventually the hostel worker told the guy no as well. Hey, get out of here, man. This guy doesn't want to go with you. The taxi driver's friend argued with the hostel guy for a bit, and then he left, mumbling. The hostel worker let me know that this was a normal thing in Morocco. If you look like you're a foreigner, they'll probably come up to you and try to guide you somewhere and then ask you for money later. And you're never required to pay the guys, but it's basically a way for them to make some money without having to provide any products or anything like that. They just show you where you need to go, and then they ask for a tip. And these guys were annoying most of the time, but there were times where they turned out to be very helpful, especially in a city like Chefchaouen, the blue city, where the entire city looked the same and it was just a bunch of alleyways that, how would you ever find anything in that city? In this first hostel in Tangier, I ran into Otto again. I feel like I can't say it like that because I'm not British. I ran into Otto again. I had met him previously in Sevilla a couple days ago. It turns out now he had his cousin traveling with him. We got along really well, and we decided that we would travel through Morocco together. I was a little nervous at the time. I wanted to be solo traveling, as I've mentioned so many times before, I wanted to spend a lot of time alone. But in Morocco, it felt a little unsafe, and I was unsure of how to navigate this whole country. It was a little bit more chaotic and a ton more foreign than I was used to with any of the other traveling I had done. The next 3 weeks with Isaac and Otto would be insane. So much fun, so much anxiety, and so much bread. So much bread. The boys and I had our first tagine in Tangier, and it was pretty good. It's this stew cooked in a big ceramic pot, and it's delicious and nutritious. But we ate way too much of it in Morocco. There was lack of diversity in the food, really, there. The boys and I met this French-Canadian girl and her friend from Paris, France, and we decided to go with them to Chefchaouen, the Blue City. We all shared a taxi ride all the way to Chefchaouen so that we could save some money. We were all packed in tight, and it was hot and dusty, but quite a fun experience. When we got there, we met Sarah, and we ended up traveling with her for quite a while. We walked all around the city and up to the Spanish mosque, where the view was absolutely extraordinary. There were cannabis plants growing in the hostel.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
If that doesn't say something about Morocco, I don't know what does. It's interesting to note that Morocco is Europe's largest supplier of cannabis. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Morocco exported nearly 8 billion euros of cannabis and hash in 2019. To put that in perspective, Mexico exporting cannabis to the US is only about 1/7 of the amount that Morocco exports to Europe. Now keep in mind, cannabis is illegal in Morocco. I do not condone illegal things, nor do I do illegal things. This is just a story. That being said, hash was all over when we were in Morocco. The boys and I were almost constantly smoking spliffs. As for alcohol, Morocco consists mostly of Muslim people, which means that they don't drink alcohol. Some do, of course, but in some cities it was very hard to find alcohol. One of those cities was Chefchaouen, and in Chefchaouen we heard that there's this secret bar somewhere. So we went on a big adventure to find it, and we finally did. It was a chill place. They kept an eye on us, but they gave us free food, like these big dishes of rice and vegetables. And after we had a couple beers, they did allow us to buy some and bring them back with us to our hostel. The next city we wanted to go to was Fez. It was an 8-hour bus ride there, and Moroccan buses don't stop for nobody and nothing. So if you gotta go to the bathroom, you best go before you get on that bus. Now usually the bus rides would stop at least one time, and at the stop there would be a little market. Sometimes they'd have a big barbecue set up and sell you bread and barbecued meat for pretty cheap. The hostel in Fez was really nice, the nicest one we would go to in Morocco. Now, it's fun to walk around in the street markets. There's a lot going on, mopeds buzzing by, people on bikes, all sorts of market stores. But everyone you walk by tries to push you to buy whatever product they have. So it gets a little tiring out there. People like, hey, buy this,
Come
over
over here,
for 15
buy
euro.
this.
They're also always trying to haggle you down, so even if you do want something, they're gonna start really high at a price, and they were tough to haggle with. You'd have to walk away from them 2, 3 times, even 4, if you really wanted something for a fair price. They also had a lot of awesome knockoffs of like Supreme clothing, Nike. They would just kind of sew on the logos themselves. In Fez, Sarah, Otto, Isaac, and I decided we would go to the Sahara Desert. How could we not? We didn't think there'd ever be a time in our life when we were that close to the Sahara. I think the full trip cost us each about 120 euros, which is quite cheap if you think about it, and we took a night bus over to the Sahara. Now, unfortunately, on this bus ride, I started feeling really sick, and I knew that a sickness was coming on. When we got to the big adobe hotel in the middle of the desert, I was really not feeling well, and I for sure had a fever, which was no good because we were in the Sahara Desert. When we did see the first dunes and the desert, our minds were blown. We all agreed it must be a simulation. In the middle of this big adobe hotel, there was a natural spring pool, which was a lifesaver because we were all burning up and I had a fever.
Yeah.
So even though we were getting sunburnt to hell, we could still chill in the water and stay cool. We stayed there one night, and then the next day, around 6 p.m., we rode camels out to our camp in the middle of the Sahara. Okay, I know I just said the middle of the Sahara, but that's nowhere near the truth. If you look at this is the continent of Africa. The Sahara actually takes up about a third of the entire continent. So we were exploring some tiny dunes within a desert that's larger than the US, including Hawaii and Alaska. It's actually quite comfortable riding a camel. They're so wide that you can sit on them pretty comfortably. And they're interesting creatures. They seem eternally wise, but also very grumpy, and I liked that about them. The rope tied around their knee is so that they don't wander off and escape from the camp. It's not the most glamorous life for a camel. Guides moving you around, having people ride on your back. So this camp that we stayed at in the Sahara Desert was a few tents, a fire pit. At the camp, there were a few other Americans and some other cool people that we would travel with to the next few cities. This is Isaac, running down a dune as fast as he can, stacking, and then dabbing. His signature move. And this is one of the guides running down the dune trying to tackle Isaac.
Yeah! Parkour, bro. Yeah.
Oh, that was actually better than I thought it turned out.
Double trouble. God damn. Broliosis down there. Doing some gnarly tricks. Red Bull 2K17. Let's go.
At night, we played drums with the Moroccan guides, and this was amazing for me, as they were all really good drummers and had amazing rhythm. I had played hand drums and African rhythms before, but not with African dudes who actually knew what they were doing. And I fell deep into a trance playing with them. In the Sahara, there was not really any bugs, no life at all, besides us and the camels. It was nice and cool at night, and we just slept on beds out in the open air, staring at the stars. I think that was the best stargazing experience I had had in my life, as there was no light pollution anywhere near us. I was feeling really sick at this point, though. I woke up with the runs and had them throughout the day, which is a terrible experience when you're in the desert and it's only a makeshift toilet. But hey, gotta do what you gotta do. In the morning after staying in the Sahara, we trekked back into the hotel so that we could chill in the cool air during the hot day. And then again in the evening, we took our trek back out to the camp in the middle of the Sahara to sleep there a second night. I had a fever, I had the runs, I was not feeling well, but I was trying to enjoy my experience as much as possible. The second time we went out there, it was crazy windy, sand flying everywhere. You would call it a sandstorm. We climbed up this really tall dune, and this guy Richard actually sandboarded all the way down it. He almost made it to the bottom, caught a ton of speed, and then just stacked so hard. And he got a gnarly sand burn all up his arm. The Moroccan guides took care of it though. On the camel ride back to the hotel, I was basically asleep on the camel. I was so sick I could barely stay awake. And from the hotel, we were going to take a 12-hour bus ride over to Marrakech. This was the first of 2 torturous bus rides that I would take in Morocco. It consisted of me sleeping most of the time, anytime we stopped at a rest stop trying to poo. I couldn't really eat much either because my stomach wasn't keeping things in. The worst part about the Moroccan rest stops, there wasn't real toilets at a lot of them. You'd try to walk into the bathroom, a guy would stop you and say,
Pay up, pay up.
You have to actually pay him money to go into the restroom. Now, in some places, that's because those guys are cleaning the bathroom, but a lot of these bathrooms were disgusting. And what the toilet was a pit and a bucket of water. No toilet paper, you're hand wiping that crap. A little bit of water from the bucket, splash, splash, clean it up, hope for the best. On July 19th of 2007, I wrote in my journal, Marrakech. Breakfast was bread and more bread. I'm so tired of bread. Everyone else went out to explore the city and I stayed back, which was good, as my case of the runs was real bad. In the Marrakech hostel, there was a bunch of people that brought instruments, guitars, and drums, and I was able to play with them. Forgot to mention in the Spain episode, I bought a hand drum. It was this beautiful orange and black ceramic drum that had a lambskin over it. Unfortunately, on the camel ride out to the camp one night, I had it on the side of my camel, and when the camel dropped down to let me off of it, it smashed my drum. Now, I was sort of able to salvage the drum, but it just had a very loose hit to it, blah, blah, instead of ba ba dee ba 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 ba. I started this really dumb and annoying game where I would ask people, "What's your favorite quote? 3, 2, 1," and have them figure it out on the spot. I got some good reactions, but some of them were just like, "Shut up." Life is butter dreams. Because you're starting now.
What?
Quote.
A quote, like,
Quick.
to each their own.
One.
That's so bad at being the big ones, but
Yeah, it looked good.
Sometimes you
Like,
just
I know
don't
no
go
one else wears a turban,
west.
and it would.
Can't have.
Rylan, what's your favorite quote? 3, 2, 1.
No, not this fucking game. Quote. What? On the 20th of July, the boys and I, Sarah, and some of the people that we had met in the Sahara took a bus to Essaouira. When we made it to Essaouira, I realized I had left one of my journals and one of my books on the bus. This was a super bummer, because I had a lot of stuff that I had written down and thought about in that journal, but I had to just let it go and not think about it. When we arrived, it was actually chilly, which was exciting because it had been so hot in Morocco for the rest of our travels. When we got to the hostel in Essaouira, I heard a bunch of African drumming, and I went down and I joined them. This was a surreal experience. To set the scene, it was a bunch of hostel workers, all Moroccan dudes, who were playing these big African drums in this dark room. It was candlelit, there was incense playing, and people were passing spliffs around the room the whole time. There were like 15 or so other people around, watching, listening, and singing along when we would sing rhythms. I played with them for an hour and a half. That made me really, really happy that I was getting to play drums and music again. I learned a few African rhythms by watching and listening and playing along with them, and I really needed this therapy.
this has been funny as well.
Otto, Isaac, and I had gotten really close. We started calling ourselves the Three Musketeers, and we'd been spending a lot of time with Sarah as well, so we started calling her D'Artagnan. Now, if you're familiar in the Three Musketeers story, there's actually 4 musketeers. The protagonist is named D'Artagnan, but it's about 3/4 through the story that D'Artagnan actually becomes a musketeer as well. We shortened her name to Dart Onion. It seemed fitting at the time. July 21st, 2017, the 3 musketeers and this guy Richard, we went out to surf for the first time. Richard had been surfing before. The boys and I had very little experience with it. It was very choppy, it was hard to swim out, but we started catching our first waves. That first day, we spent 3.5 hours out in the ocean trying to learn to surf. That night, we also went on a pub crawl, one of the first ones I had gone on in my travels. And it was funny because in Morocco, there's not a ton of bars, so we actually only went to one bar. There was no music in the bar, it was just a bunch of Moroccan guys hanging around, drinking beer. People kept shaking our hands and welcoming us.
Welcome, brother, welcome. We're happy you are here.
It was very joyous and everyone was very nice to us. And then at 1 a.m., foreigners were abruptly asked to leave. They said, "Get out or we'll make you get out." And we were so confused. We got a couple beers to go and drank them on the beach. I thought I would be going to bed after that, but when I got back to the hostel, again, the drummers were playing. And I played with them through the night. That next day was my birthday, July 22nd. Everybody sang me happy birthday at 12 a.m., and I felt overwhelmed with joy that I was in Morocco, playing African drums and hanging out with some really good buddies of mine on my birthday. On my birthday, we walked to the surf shack and we surfed again. The conditions weren't as good as the day before, but it felt good that we were learning in bad conditions so that when they did get easier, we would have an easy time. We ended my birthday day just drinking wine and smoking hash up on the roof of the hostel. Couldn't have asked for a better day. The next day we went to the fish market in town. It smelled like rotting fish. It was super stinky. Actually, I was taking videos of them selling and auctioning off the fish, and they saw that I was doing that and got very angry and asked us to leave. Not sure what the rules are around that, but sorry for taking pictures of your fish, buddy. Otto and Isaac tried some raw oysters in lime, and I tried some sea urchin, which mostly just tasted like the ocean. The 3 musketeers decided we would go to City Kaoki, which was a tiny little surf town, only a few buildings and a few homes there. On the bus ride to that city, the bus stopped and the doors fell off of the bus.
They hit the ticket guy in the head and then smashed on the ground. All the glass shattered on the street. The ticket guy seemed okay, so everyone helped lift the doors of the bus back into the bus, kind of shoved it in between everybody, and we continued on our way with a fully open side of the bus. The bus must have been from the 50s or something, but we felt like that was so Morocco, for us just to be driving somewhere and the doors fully fell off of the bus. We couldn't believe it. I hope that ticket guy's okay. He may have gotten a concussion. But I guess we'll never know. When we arrived to city Kaoki, we surfed for 3 hours. The waves were huge, which is why it's a surf town. I got pretty sick from all the tumbling and all the swallowing of seawater. We were so tired from 3 days in a row of surfing that we could barely get ourselves to dinner, but we knew we needed to eat. There was only one restaurant in town and it turned out to be really tasty. We got some fish burgers. The hostel in that town was actually a 3-bedroom, living room, and full kitchen for the 3 of us. It was the most space we had had in a long time, and it was really nice to relax that way. We woke up pretty sore and exhausted. We got a 25 dirham breakfast, which was coffee, juice, cereal, eggs, and you guessed it, bread. Bread. What a terrible word, too. Bread. Bread. Do you have more bread? I wrote that. At least this time there was butter, raw honey, and argan oil for our bread. We surfed for 4 hours that day, so we were just going day after day. We really wanted to learn to surf, and we were having tons of fun doing it.
If I can't surf at the end of it, that's a joke.
Isaac ended up feeling sick this day. I was hoping he didn't get what I got, and it turns out he healed pretty quickly from his sickness, but Otto and I talked a lot on the roof of our hostel. He's actually a chemist, which I found fascinating, that was a career he was going into. The next day, there was no way we could surf. We were too sore and exhausted. Isaac talked some other surfer dudes in the town that were driving back to Essaouira into bringing us there with them. Then we caught a bus to Taghazout. The bus dropped us outside of town on the highway, and we were very confused. We saw that we were about to pass the town. They stopped on the highway, ushered us out of the bus, threw our bags on the side of the road, and drove off. And we were like, hopefully we're in the right place. Now, if I had been alone in that situation, without the 3 Musketeers group, I would have felt very scared and very uncomfortable. But it turns out it was just a 30-minute walk or so to get to our hostel. In Taghazout, there was a place with burgers and fries and milkshakes. We couldn't have been happier. We hadn't found that type of food in a very long time, and we filled ourselves to the brim with tasty American goodness. I wrote in my journal that it felt like an oasis. Now, the 27th of July was Isaac's birthday, and guess what we did for his birthday? We surfed. I brought my iPhone 7 into the ocean actually to take videos of us surfing and made an edit for Isaac's birthday. The waves were way smaller in Taghazout, and so it was a chill session. We ate burgers again on his birthday. This hostel had a surf trip planned the next day at 10:30, so we took that. We went out and surfed with a bunch of other people. The waves were huge. I caught the biggest wave of my life, to this day. As I was dropping in, I was like, I better not fall on this. This is dangerous. But I caught it, and I was riding it. Isaac caught it as well. As I was feeling fully joyous and happy that I caught this wave, I saw on the beach that everyone was waving their arms and yelling at me. I looked in front of me and noticed that there was a bunch of jagged rocks, and I jumped off my board and off the wave in time to not get smashed. Wouldn't that have been an odd ending to my life? Caught the biggest and best wave of my life and then just smash! Bye-bye. At least that would have been pretty climactic for my life. Chuck out the surfer hair, dude. The last day with the 3 Musketeers all together was bittersweet. We rented some fishing poles, but we were unsuccessful as the bait was just squishy, soggy sardines that wouldn't even stay on the hook when we threw them into the water. In the afternoon, we had some shots of whiskey, freestyle rapped, and then got burgers and shakes for the last time. We said goodbye and I went to go catch a taxi to get to my bus. I was already pressed for time to get to this bus, but the taxi driver started arguing with a different taxi driver. They were yelling at each other. I had no idea what was going on. And then the first guy said, go with the second guy. The guy that I ended up going with stopped for 7 minutes at a store, and I told him I need to get to my bus right away. The clock is ticking. After I said that, he sped real fast. I felt very unsafe. He blew through a bunch of red lights, was passing people back and forth, and it was nighttime, so I couldn't really tell what was going on. When we got to the station, the bus was already pulling out. I jumped out of the taxi, waved down the bus, stood in front of it. They actually stopped for me and let me on. And on the bus, I thought a lot about how I'm just lucky in general, and felt very grateful. Sometime in the morning on my 14-hour bus ride, I started feeling sick. Initially, I thought it was motion sickness, which I thought was odd because I don't tend to get motion sickness. This would turn out to be the second time in Morocco that I got unusually sick. I got a bag ready on the bus in case I threw up, which I did 3 times. And then I sealed the bag, put it in the seat pocket in front of me, and realized that everyone on the bus could hear and smell my vomit. I felt really bad for everyone else around me. The next pit stop, I threw up the rest of my meals. I felt horrid and needed so much sleep. The bus left the day previous at 10:30 p.m. and arrived at the ferry port the next day in the afternoon. I was barely awake the whole time. I could not keep my eyes open, and I kept throwing up. This is what I wrote in my journal about all the sleepiness. For these 24 hours, starting from yesterday, I barely was awake. When the bus arrived, I still needed to get to the port. I got to the port, waited 3.5 hours mostly asleep, and feeling really bad. Waited another hour for the ferry, mostly sleeping. Then a 2-hour ferry, mostly asleep. Then bought a bus ticket from Algeciras to Cadiz, but fell asleep and missed it. Barely had enough energy to make it to a nearby hotel, showered and slept for another 11 hours. When I woke up on July 31st, I felt a lot better. Very groggy, but at least I was not feeling sick in my stomach anymore, and I felt like I had caught up on some sleep.
So I had made it back to Spain, barely awake, feeling terrible, but I was back and out of Morocco. That completes episode 5. Episode 6, I'll spend a tiny bit more time in Spain and then off to Portugal. I loved Portugal, it's an amazing place, and I can't wait to tell you about that next week. Remember, this series comes out every Saturday until the end of the year, so I hope to see you coming along for the ride. Peace out.